That rust bucket still fly, or do you just taxi it around for nostalgia? Oh, F-16 pilot jered, laughing loud enough for the hangar to hear. She said nothing, just climbed into the cockpit and closed the canopy like it was ritual. By nightfall, they all stood silent, staring at the name stencled beneath the canopy, the same name carved into her dog tags. If you believe true strength doesn't need to speak, type Honer below. Davis Sumatan Air Force Base in Arizona sprawled across the desert like a monument to American air power. Endless acres of heat, shimmer concrete runways, and polished steel aircraft gleaming under the relentless southern sun. Most pilots stationed there were young, loud, and fast. F-16 fighting Falcons ruled the runways with their sleek profiles and aggressive equipage, proudly flown by aviators who treated aerial combat like an extreme sport, requiring youth reflexes and unshakable confidence. Among these hotshot fighter jocks arrived Captain Aaron Dalton, 36 years old, seen at not a glamorous F-16 squadron or even a high-tech drone command center, but tone aging a 10 Thunderbolt II. The ugly, slow, supremely durable aircraft, affectionately known throughout the Air Force as the Warthog, she reported for duty without fanfare or bravado, speaking only when spoken to. She didn't participate in the competitive banter and swaggering that defined the Viper Knights. The nickname, the F-16 squadron, wore with fierce pride. Her Warthog bore a dull gray paint scheme weathered from years of service and desert exposure. No elaborate nose art decorations, no colorful unit decals or personal touches. Just one small press stencil beneath the canopy frame. Captain E. Dalton. That's when thieverball harassment began in earnest. The trust bucket still airworthy? Lieutenant Kyle Branson quipped, casually flipping his fighter pilot helmet between his shins with practice arrogance. You sort that thing doesn't need a mechanical walker for ground support, added Lieutenant Carlos Ramirez, drawing calls from the gathered pilots. Exactly how many enemy fighters you planning outmaneuver in that flying tank? Zero seems optimistic, continued Staff Sergeant Miller. Captain Dalton never responded to their taunts. No visible anger, no defensive retorts, no attempts to justify her aircraft assignment. She simply followed routine checklist review, thorough flight inspection, strap in, and execute her missions with mechanical precision. The loudest antagonist was Lieutenant Kyle Branson, youngest member of the Viper Squadron, but already established as their unofficial ringleader. Clean-cut appearance, high-tempo personality, born for speed and aerial superiority missions. You flying that antique ironically, Dalton? Or are you just that sentimental about museum pieces? He would say whenever she passed the squadron-ready room. Aaron offered no retorts or explanations. That silence irritated Branson even more than direct confrontation would have. The rest of fighter squadron followed his lead, assuming she was some kind of airshow nostalgic, clinging to outdated technology instead of embracing modern combat aircraft. But the experienced crew noticed something different about Captain Dalton's pre-flight rituals. Every time she prepared her aircraft for mission, she whispered something under her breath, a name that mechanics couldn't quite hear, but recognized as deeply personal. And after every flight, regardless of mission duration or complexity, she remained in the hangar longer than necessary, running her gloved hand across the A-10E's fuselage like it was sacred metal, carrying memories too importante abandon. The maintenance chief exchanged knowing glances, but neverest questions. Understanding that some pilots carry burdens heavier than fuel loads and more personal than service records. They sensed her connection to that particular aircraft ran deeper than standard piloto-actor relationships. But military protocol discouraged personal inquiries into matters that didn't affect operational readiness. A complex joint training operation was scheduled for the following week, designed to test coordination between different aircraft types under simulated combat conditions. F-16 fighting Falcons would execute high-altitude reconnaissance missions and air-to-air Combat simulations against imaginary enemy fighters. Captain Dalton's A-10 Thunderbolt was included primarily to provide close-air support simulation for hypothetical ground forces, essentially a supporting role that most fighter pilots consider routine. Formality. The mission briefing session was conducted with typical military efficiency. Lieutenant Branson rolled his eyes conspicuously whenever Captain Dalton offered tactical input, asked clarifying questions about coordination procedures. Let the Fosiildo her museum piece demonstration. Hugh whispered audibly to Lieutenant Ramirez, who responded with an appreciaticule that several other pilots heard and tacitly approved. On the sun-baked tarmac, as morning temperatures climbed toward triple digits, the F-16s taxied toward their assigned runway positions like eager greyhounds straining against leashes. Captain Dalton's A-10 followed behind at a more measured pace, heavier, more deliberate, noticeably quieter than screaming fighter jets. During the actual training exercise, unexpected competition developed rapidly. A simulated surfaceto air missile city chiefs surprise targeting lock on the F-16 formation, forcing them to abort their planned low-level reconnaissance prep and climb rapidly to Saffrel Tittids. Lieutenant Ramirez's aircraft was designated mission killed by exercise controllers and required immediate extraction simulation from hostile territory, creating a tactical emergency that tested all participants' sympastristaverst skills. Captain Dalton didn't request permission or wait for specific orders. She simply pushed her A-10 into a controlled dive towards the simulated danger zone. The Thunderbolt destined like a guided missile banking sharply into the valley terrain, expertly dodging imaginary anti-aircraft fire while maintaining perfect weapons positioning for laser-guided attack runs so precisely executed that exercise controls. Initially suspected per programmed automation, she completed additional passes to provide simulated cover fire for Lieutenant Brand's defensive position despite his complete failure to acknowledge her assistance through radio communications or tactical coordination. When the training exercise concluded, the range controller announced results with obvious surprise. A-10 Thunderbolt achieved highest tactical effectiveness string for the exercise period. Back at Base Operations Center, pilots gathered for mandatory after-action debriefing sessions. Lieutenant Branson offered sarcastic applause that echoed through the briefing room. "Congratulations, Dalton. You successfully kept the museum PC operational for an entire training mission," he announced with theatrical condescence. This time, no other pilots joined his mockery. Several looked uncomfortable with his continued harassment. Staff Sergeant Perry, a quiet aircraft maintenance specialist who had been observing the squadron dynamics for weeks, approached Lieutenant Branson after the briefing room cleared. "You have absolutely no idea who she actually is, do you?" Perry asked directly. "Yeah, I know exactly who she is. The lady flying the obsolete antique," Branson replied dismissively. "That antique aircraft saved half my infantry squadron heavy combat in Helmand Province. The specific A-10 she's flying, that exact tail number used to be piloted by Lieutenant Colonel Jack Dalton." Branson's expression shifted slightly. "Dalton? As in, yeah, as in her father?" Perry confirmed with quiet intensity. Staff Sergeant Perry stared directly at the young fighter pilot. "And you just spent weeks mocking the only person on this base who flies exactly like he did. Some pilots accumulate awards and recognition. Others inherit legacies that transcend individual achievement. If understanding that distinction matters to you, type respect lives on below." Word spread through the aircraft maintenance hangars with the speed fatally military gossip networks can achieve. No one could definitively confirm how Staff Sergeant Perry had acquired his detailed knowledge. Butte official maintenance records didn't leave out documented facts. Aircraft tail number 780823, Captain Dalton's assigned A-10 Thunderbolt had previously been flown by Lieutenant Colonel Jack Dalton, a legendary close air support pilot whose final mission had become the stuff of Air Force folklore. Lieutenant Colonel Dalton had executed a suicidal-awaited rescue mission in Afghanistan's Helmand province, single-handedly providing covering fire that allowed an entire pinned-down infantry platoon to escape certain annihilation by overwhelming enemy forces. His heroic actions had saved 23 American lives, but cost him his own when ground-fired ordnance finally found its mark during his fourth consecutive strafing run against entrenched positions. Captain Erin Dahlman had deliberately kept this connection private. For obvious reasons, she didn't want special treatment, sympatheticalism, or unearned recognition based on family heritage. She had one clear objective: to pilot his aircraft with the same skill and dedication he had demonstrated. The following morning, Lieutenant Branson approached her workstation in the maintenance hangar, moving with uncharacteristic hesitation and obvious discomfort. He noticed the name stenciling beneath the cockpit canopy had been professionally modified overnight by unknown maintenance person. It now displayed two names in precise military lettering: Lieutenant Colonel J. Dalton, Captain E. Dalton. Two generations, one bloodline, one aircraft carrying forward an unbroken legacy of service. "Why didn't you tell us about your father?" Branson asked, his usual arrogance replaced by genuine curiosity and something approaching respect. "You weren't interested in listening," Captain Dalton replied calmly, continuing her pre-flight equipment inspection. "And I wasn't seeking sympathy or special consideration." A long, uncomfortable silence stretched between them, while either maintenance personnel continued their work around the hangar, pretending not to observe this unprecedented conastrave. Then Lieutenant Branson did something that surprised everyone within hearing distance. He extended his hand in a gesture of reconciliation and respect. "Your father was a genuine agent in the Air Force," he said with obvious sincerity, "and you flew exact like him during yesterday's exercise." Captain Dalton didn't smile or show emotional response, but she accepted his handshake with firm professionalism. That afternoon, during scheduled training drills, two F-16 pilots specifically requested coordination with Captain Dalton's attend for joint strike simulations. She accepted their request without comment. Later in the squadron ready room, the same men who had mocked her aircraft choice just days earlier now watched recorded footage of her precision strafing runs with quiet, respectful attention. "Did you observe how low she maintained a altitude during that valley approach?" Lieutenant Ramirez commented with obvious admiration. Textbook Jack Dalton Technic. Staff Sergeant Purvey confirmed knowingly. Word of her heritage spread beyond the immediate squadron, reaching veteran pilots and ground crew members who had served during her father's era, recognized the tactical similarities in their flying styles. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, a 20-year maintenance veteran, approached Captain Dalton during her post-flight inspection routine. "Ma'am, I worked on your father's aircraft during his deployment rotations. Same attention to detail, same respect for the machine. He would be proud of how you honor his memory." Captain Dalton nodded once in acknowledgement, but offered no verbal response, maintaining the professional distance she had established since arriving at Davis Mountain. But her maintenance routine, that event included an additional element. She spent extra time examining the newly updated name, stenciling, running her fingers across both names as if confirming their permanence. The A-10 Thunderbolt that had once carried her father into his final heroic mission would continue flying under family command, carrying forward a legacy that transcended individual service records. 2 weeks later, Davis Monthan Air Force Base scheduled its annual Heritage Flyover, a public demonstration designed to showcase legacy aircraft and unearth historical evolution of American airpower for military families and civilian sporters. As expected, the modern F-16 fighting Falcons were programmed as thefanale performers. Their sleek profile and impressive maneuverability to generate enthusiastic crowd response. Before the fighter jets, a single A-10 Thunderbolt was scheduled for a demonstration flight, to pick Oliviewit as a warm-up act before the main attraction. When Captain Dalton's Warthog lifted off from the runway, the assembled crowd initially paid minimal attention, expecting routine flight patterns and standard maneuvers from the aging aircraft. But then she executed a perfect banking turn, performed a textbook cloverleaf formation, and swept across the desert sky in a complex serial sequence that veteran observers immediately recognized the Reaper Cross Lieutenant Colonel Jack Dalton's signature maneuver. The intricate formation flying required exceptional skill, precise timing, and intimate handling of the attendees' flight characteristic under extreme conditions. Spectators stopped their conversations and stared upward. Military veterans in the crowd came to attention spontaneously. Several elderly men raised their hands in respectful salutes. In the control tower, one senior officer whispered with obvious emotion, "That's not standard demonstration flying anymore. That's personal tribute." When she completed the aerial sequence and brought the A-10 in for landing, the aircraft taxied slowly toward its designated parking position while ground crews prepared for the F-16 demonstration that would follow. As Captain Dalton shut down the Thunderbolt engines, Lieutenant Branson and the entire Viper Night Squadron stood waiting on the tarmac. Information. One by one, without verbal command or coordination, they raised their hands in formal military salute. Captain Dalton descended from the aircraft ladder, carrying her flight helmet under one arm, the same professional posture her father had maintained throughout his distinguished career. She acknowledged their salute briefly, then walked past them toward the maintenance hangar with quiet dignity that commanded respect without demanding recognition. On the A-10's weather-beaten nose cone, someone had added a new detail, painted in small, precise, white lettering "Legacy Flown Forward." Captain Dalton examined the addition without comment. She did tinker about who had authorized the modification or when it had been completed. She simply studied it for several moments, nodded once in approval, and supervised the aircraft's post-flight maintenance procedures. The following week, 3 additional F-16 pilots requested joint training opportunities with her A-10, sitting interest in learning close-air support coordination techniques that she had demonstrated during previous exercises. Her tactical expertise and professional compt had finally earned their recognition that family heritage alone could never have provided. Staff Sergeant Perry, watching from the maintenance area, commented to his colleagues, "Some honors don't come with ribbons or official ceremonies. Some come in silence when those who once mocked you now walk respectfully in your shad." Master Sergeant Rodriguez added, "Some aircraft become obsolete and fade from memory. Some names echo through generations. When you carry Somion's legacy forward, you don't just fly their aircraft, you continue their mission." On the A-10 Thunderbolt that served 2 generations of Dalton family pilots would continue flying, carrying forward a tradition of service that transcended individual careers and embodied the continuity of military education across time. Because true legacy isn't inherited, it's earned through actions that honor those who came before while building foundations for those who will follow. Subscribe to Iron Heart Stories, where every moment of respect, redemption, and real courage takes